Hello and welcome to day 5 of our Christmas Novena. Today in the scriptures we hear about a mini miracle. We hear Elizabeth decide on the name John for her son. Zechariah also, who at this time is without speech because of his doubt of God's will, is also decided on the name John. It says in scriptures that everyone in their presence were amazed that they decided on this, because back then you'd carry on the name of the family. And this name of John is something new to them. But both of them independently coming to the name John was a miracle, was a sign, and we take it as a sign of God's will. After Zechariah decides the name John, it says his speech is returned. I read that scripture and I see his story as a journey of learning how to submit himself to the will of God, but also to submit himself to God's love. That's what I want to focus on, submitting to God's love and what this means to us during the season of Advent and through our entire life. We are building up to Christmas, the coming of the Word made flesh, Jesus coming into our world and showing us how to love, but also how to submit ourselves to God's love. Jesus' message is just that, love. Simply to love God and love one another, the two greatest commandments that he leaves us with. To me, that is my bread and butter of how to be simply a good person, to try to get up and to be better the next day, to submit myself to God's love, to realize that God has unconditional love no matter what I do or the lack of things that I may do. And I too, in return and in gratitude, must attempt to love the same. Submitting to God's love is an endless journey. It's not one day you turn the light switch and you're done and you're loving unconditionally. As a new father, I believe I've learned to love in a whole new level. And I'm able to do that, I believe, because I submitted to God's love. I allowed myself to be loved as a child of God. Likewise, my job now is to love my son just the same, and every day to love more and more. And that type of love teaches me and encourages me to love others just the same. Easier said than done, but not impossible. Zechariah has his speech returned because he submits to God's love. He acknowledges that God is in control and that we must follow God's example of loving. And I believe that Elizabeth and Zechariah come to this conclusion that the child's name must be John because of God's will. God's will comes to them. It's not them searching for God's will, purposely asking for God's will to be revealed to them. It just comes to them because they submit themselves to God. On our journey to Christmas Day, we hope to prepare our hearts for the coming of the Lord into our world, that we can prepare our hearts just that much more to love ourselves, to allow ourselves to be loved, and to love others.